What's up guys, Matt here from Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson. So in the wake of the coronavirus right now, everybody's flipping out, everybody's saying it's the end of the world. So I thought it would be appropriate to do a video on the Fat Bob, the 2020 model year Fat Bob. I feel like Harley-Davidson stylized this bike, and the inspiration behind it is kind of that post-apocalyptic look that has been generated from pop culture in recent years. I think the whole zombie apocalypse and post-nuclear apocalypse or whatever ends the world post-pandemic, whatever ends the world, there's a lot of TV shows and things in pop culture in the last decade or so that gives us a visualization of what the post-apocalyptic world could look like. And I feel like a lot of the vehicles in popular movies and TV shows like Mad Max and The Walking Dead kind of depict what that vehicle would look like. In my opinion, and I haven't gotten any official word from Harley-Davidson, but when I first saw the Fat Bob when it was redesigned in the 2018 model year, the lines and the look and the parts and everything kind of reminded me of that Mad Max or post-apocalyptic look. And the Fat Bob styling has always kind of been out of the box. It's been that bike that Harley-Davidson's kind of played with the styling a bit. When the bike was first introduced in the 2008 model year, it came out with that double headlight in the front, which was a style that really didn't draw upon any type of past in Harley-Davidson's history. A lot of the Dynas and the now soft-tail chassis bikes like your Street Bob and Fat Bob and Lowrider, they kind of draw upon like the old styling of the Lowriders and the FXRs, which is kind of a huge culture right now in the Harley-Davidson world that I talk about a lot. Kind of that Dyna or soft tail with the fairing and the T-bars, the club style. And the Fat Bob doesn't look like that at all. It's something that very much is different. And so for that reason, I feel like the Fat Bob hasn't appealed to the masses like the Lowrider has. And some of you who have been watching my channel for a while, I talked a lot about how the Fat Bob, the 2008 to 2017 Fat Bob, was the #1 most underrated Harley-Davidson in their lineup. It wasn't sold that much. People didn't really know about it that much. Not that many people had it. And because of the styling, I think a lot of people just judged it and didn't buy it, when in my opinion that was the best Dyna that Harley-Davidson has ever made. And now that the new 2018 Softail chassis come out and the Fat Bob came out as kind of their flagship performance-oriented bike, when the new Softail chassis was launched, it was only a bike with dual disc brakes. It came with a 114 option, which some of the other bikes did as well. But it had the 28-degree rake in the front end for a little bit more twitchy, nimble handling. Which now the Lowrider S has that as well. And just the seats and the handlebars and the exhaust was like a real radical styling as well. And just like the headlamp as well, I feel like was one more kind of attribute to that post-apocalyptic look as well. So the Fat Bob, in my opinion, really goes outside the box and outside the lines within the Harley-Davidson world. And I feel like the designers probably had fun with the bike. I haven't really talked to the people that were in charge of the styling behind the Fat Bob, but I think even now with the 2018 overhaul on these bikes, the Fat Bob is still the #1 most underrated bike in Harley-Davidson's lineup. And I think, again, it's because of the styling. I think the styling appeals to a lot more people than the styling of the Generation 1 Fat Bob did. But I still think that so many of the guys that buy these mid-size performance-oriented cruisers want that Dyna look with the fairing and the T-bars and the club style look like we talk about so often. But I want to give a challenge to you guys, especially if you're looking for a bike right now, ride the Fat Bob. If you're looking for a soft tail, ride the Fat Bob. Do a test ride. You might be surprised. Personally, the Fat Bob is my #1 most favorite soft tail, and it was also my #1 most favorite Dyna that Harley-Davidson made as well. I love the tire size. I just love the way that they handle. The Fat Bob does have forward controls as well, which on the new soft tail chassis, the forward controls really aren't as pronounced and as far in front of you as like the Dyna forward controls were. So you might be surprised. You don't really have to be a tall guy per se to fit to the forward controls on the new Softail chassis really well. So once again, yeah, try it out for yourself. But let's jump into this bike. I'm going to give you guys a walk around and kind of give you a brief overview. This is going to be a little bit of a hybrid video where I do both review the bike and kind of give you guys a little bit of what I feel like was the inspiration behind the styling for this motorcycle and kind of how it fits into Harley-Davidson's lineup as a whole. So let's jump into this 2020 model year Fat Bob walk around here. So like I mentioned earlier, in the 2018 model year, they completely changed the bike. In the 17 model year, it was still a Dyna on the Dyna frame with the twin cam engine. And in the 18 model year, they merged the old Dyna and old Softail frames together into one like frame, and they called it the Softail frame, which wasn't really a popular decision among a lot of people, but they named it the Softail frame, and they applied their Milwaukee 8 engine to the bike, which was just released 1 year prior on just the touring chassis bikes. So the second year the Milwaukee 8 engine was available, they applied it to the Softail frames, and the Softails, guys, are Harley-Davidson's mid-size bikes. So the bulk of Harley-Davidson's bikes are now built on 3 chassis. You have your Sportster family, your Softail family, and your Touring family. You've also got the Streets there, which Harley-Davidson sells very few. Most of those bikes are built for the Riders Academy course, but you can still get the Street 750 and the Street Rod. But the mid-size frame is the Softail frame, and a large portion of Harley-Davidson's bikes that they sell are built on this frame. So just jumping into some of the parts and everything on this bike, you've got an inverted front end on this. You've got the 114. The 114 is the only displacement option you have now. When those first introduced, you could get the 107 as well, but now since this is more a performance focused model, you can only get the 114 cubic inch. And you've got a lot of the blacked out features on this bike, and the blacked out features I think are drawn kind of from that bobber look and bobber era. When the Fat Bob was first introduced in 08, I feel like it kind of had that bobber with a futuristic twist on it. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like it's gotten one more twist and it's kind of gotten that post-apocalyptic look. Here's a light bar in the front, which I really like a lot, guys. I love it. I like it that it's unique. It's only found on the Fat Bob. The light bar I think was a trending style when this bike first came out. There was a lot of guys that were buying these light bars and putting it on the front of their Sportsters that were used for like dirt trackers. Like saw a couple of them on Rusty Butcher's bikes, and so I thought the light bar was a really cool, tasteful look. Going all along those lines of the post-apocalyptic look as well, I feel like the lights are always kind of weird and funky on those bikes as well, so I thought that was kind of a good styling cue. Here you got the wrinkled black derby cover, the 114 on the side there, representing how many cubic inches the bike has. Here's a shot of the seat. The seat's really nice. It's a nice one-piece seat that's a 2-up, so you can ride a passenger on here. The passenger seat isn't really that great, but the rider seat is really nice. You've got a really good lip in the back to really keep you planted. Here you can see that big ducktail fender, bobbed fender. Here's a shot of the wheels. You got this really big fat tire on here. You've also got kind of a unique tire as well that was designed by Dunlop specifically for this motorcycle in conjunction with Harley-Davidson. And you've got kind of this like knobby tread pattern on the bike, kind of give it that hint or look that it's off-road capable. It's not really. These are very much street tires, but it's got kind of that look to it, like it could be like a little bit of a knobby tire that could be off-road capable. Here on the left side, this is a kind of an underutilized feature. You got a USB port here, which comes in handy if you want to charge your cell phone or whatever. It doesn't really transmit any data to the bike or anything like that. It's mostly just used for power source. Here we go to the dash. You've got your tank, which is a 3.5 gallon tank, which is kind of one of those things about the Fat Bob that a lot of people don't like about it. A lot of people want that 5 gallon tank, but I think a lot of the people that just judge the tank don't really realize how many miles you can get out of this. You're going to get between 130, 150 miles per tank of fuel. The range is actually pretty dang good. You know, the touring bikes with 6 gallons, you're going to get like 180, maybe 200 miles. And so really not that bad. Here's a shot of the external preload adjuster. The Softails all have a little bit different way. There's 3 different versions of preload adjusters that come on these bikes. This is what's considered the most premium one of all 3. It's a little bit more accessible. The other ones you need to pop the seat off and use tools. But the preload there doesn't raise or lower the seat height. That's kind of a big misconception. Really what it does is it softens or stiffens up the ride, where if you have more weight on there, maybe you're riding a passenger, you want to adjust that to get the best spring rate out of the tail end. The wheels are also kind of a cool feature on this motorcycle as well. The only wheel in the Softail lineup that has these etched graphics on the rim. So a really cool detail point on the Fat Bob. You can see that it has it in the front and the rear. There you can kind of see the tire as well, like I mentioned already. This has dual disc brakes on here. There aren't a whole lot of bikes that have the dual disc brakes in the Softail lineup, especially when it was first introduced in the 18 model year. Then very next year you had the FXDR, which is actually going away next year, but the FXDR had the dual disc brakes the year after, and then in the 2020 model year we've got the Lowrider S that has the dual disc brakes as well. So the dual disc brakes, this bike stops really well. I usually tell people, you know, you're not really compromising stopping power by getting a bike with a single disc on it. That stops really good, but with that dual disc brakes you could be riding really hard and reduce the likelihood of brake fade in heavy braking conditions if you're really riding on a hard, like braking before every single turn. You got a lot of that rear tire exposed, once again kind of giving it that off-road slash, you know, if I need to go in the dirt for a minute, you know, I'm good on this bike. Although once again, the Fat Bob is not advertised, or Harley-Davidson doesn't make any representation that this is an off-road bike. I wouldn't buy it for off-road purposes, but if you need to hit an easy fire road or something like that, you could probably do it. I also love the exhaust system on this bike. It's really unique to the Fat Bob. You've got kind of this upswept style in the tail end. You've also got this bronze finish on the header pipe as well. Very unique to just the Fat Bob. You don't have an exhaust system that looks like this on any other Softail. The upswept look and curvature to the exhaust in the rear end kind of suggests, once again, it's got that off-road capability. Gives you a little bit more clearance in the tail end, which for the most part you're not going to use it. But again, you know, in that post-apocalyptic circumstance when the roads all disappear and you have to take it in the dirt, well, the Fat Bob's got you covered. Really, the best way I can describe a Fat Bob is that it's a mid-sized cruiser with a focus on performance that stays true to Harley-Davidson's premium values in creating a motorcycle, and it doesn't take its styling cues from Harley-Davidson's past history of bikes, much like most all the other bikes, but more takes an approach from like a bobber slash pop culture apocalyptic world type of styling point. So I feel like the number one bike that the Fat Bob is going to get compared to is the Lowrider S. As many of you know, the Lowrider S was reintroduced this year in the 2020 model year to the lineup, and the Lowrider S really has a lot of things going for it. It's got kind of this cult following to it, and it's also a performance-based cruiser, much like the Fat Bob is. So a lot of the features like the inverted front end, the big 114 engine, dual disc brakes, all of these things are also on the Lowrider S. So I want to talk a minute just about what kind of separates these two bikes in case you guys are trying to figure out. You want a bike in this vein where it's performance-based cruiser, but you're not really sure which direction to go. I will mention as well, there's an FXDR. The FXDR is also a performance-based cruiser with a lot of the features that I mentioned. However, I feel like Harley-Davidson missed the mark so bad as far as the styling on this bike. It basically killed this bike from day one. Harley-Davidson is not going to make the bike next year, by the way. So if you're looking for an FXDR, get one quick because they are going out of production soon. So let's kind of stick to the Fat Bob and the Lowrider S. So let's start with the fuel tank. That's kind of the big obvious one. A lot of people like the fact that you got a 5-gallon tank on the Lowrider S, so a little bit more range. Like I mentioned already in this video, I think the range difference isn't as much as people might think. Yes, you're going to get maybe 40 more miles per fuel tank than you would out of the Fat Bob. The Fat Bob, I will say, and this is something that's I don't think is known by very many people, you have a taller shock in the Fat Bob, and so the ride quality on the Fat Bob is a little bit better because you've got more suspension travel on it. Also adjustability. If adjustability, like adjusting the preload, is important to you, you've got the external preload knob on the Fat Bob, whereas on the Lowrider S, you got to take the seat off and you have to adjust it with a tool under there. Can't remember if the Lowrider S has the hydraulic one or if it's much like the Street Bob where you have to just adjust it with that wrench. Lighting is a little bit different. I wouldn't say one is really that much better than another, but I think after that, guys, really a lot of it comes down to the style as well. Which of these do you like the style of? Like I already mentioned, the really popular club style or purpose-built cruiser style really lends itself to be built on a lowrider S a lot more than the Fat Bob. I feel like with the Fat Bob, you kind of go a different direction with it. The two bikes we have out here right now are the 2020, and we have also got a 2018 Fat Bob that Andrew is on in the Bonneville Salt Denim. He's also got the stainless steel Vance & Hines upswept exhaust on here, which sounds extremely good, by the way. I was a huge fan of this pipe. It sounded great and performed good as well. The 114's got plenty of giddy up. This bike weighs in at about 670 pounds, somewhere around there, so the power to weight ratio is great. Gets up to speed really good out on the highway. I love the graphics on the tank as well. You've got the asymmetrical graphics for Harley-Davidson on top of the tank on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you've got the outline of the barn shield. Looks really trick. I'd say the feeling in the wheels is a little bit different as well. You've got a little bit fatter tire in the front on the Fat Bob. Personally, I like the fat tires on the Fat Bob. It's not too fat to where you're really going to compromise performance, but it almost gives you a little bit more of that shock absorption properties. And rolling the bike in and out of turns on the Fat Bob, I think it's a little bit more fluid, predictable motion as well when compared to the Lowrider S. That being said, the Lowrider S is a great bike to rip on as well, but I just think that the Fat Bob is a little bit more predictable and a little easier in and out of turns, for lack of a better description. Out on the freeway at high speeds, these bikes are super comfortable. Obviously, you're going to catch quite a bit of wind. You have no wind deflection on these bikes, but the suspension's great at high speeds. You do feel the difference in the fact that this bike has a 28-degree rake as opposed to the 30-degree rake that a lot of the other Softails have. It just requires less input into the bars to really put it into a turn. It definitely feels a little bit more nimble in and out and transitioning into turns. Out on the highway though, and this is really splitting hairs bad, out on the highway I do prefer the 30-degree rake angle. So if you want a bike that's a little bit more capable out on the highway, high speeds for long distance, I prefer a Softail that has a 30-degree rake as opposed to the 28. I just feel like it's a little bit more stable when you're going down the highway at high speeds, which makes sense because that's kind of a feature of a cruiser. Cruisers typically have that front wheel spaced out a little bit more in front of the bike when you compare it to say a sport bike, something that's really made for the track. So let's talk for a minute about who I recommend this bike to. I feel like on pretty much every video people will ask me if XYZ bike is a good beginner bike, so we'll start there. No, this is not a good beginner's bike. Can a beginner learn on it? Yeah, sure, absolutely, you can learn on this, but it's just not a good bike. It's not conducive to the things that come along with learning, like dropping the bike every once in a while. I mean, this is a $18,500 to $19,000 bike depending on what color you get it in. So little mistakes that you're inevitably going to make as a beginner are just going to be more costly than they really need to be. I think you make those learner mistakes on a bike that is less expensive. A street, if you want to stick with Harley-Davidson, a street is a good beginner's bike, and a Sportster is a pretty decent beginner's bike as well. Now, if you've had some experience riding motorcycles in the past and you're a confident motorcycle rider, even if it's on a dirt or sport bike, maybe this is your first Harley, absolutely, all day long, especially if this bike checks off a lot of the boxes that I've been talking about. You want a cruiser with a little bit more of a performance-based features on it. This is a great bike, especially if you like the style on top of all those things as well. Great bike. Maybe you're gonna do the occasional weekend trip, but you're not gonna be laying down a whole lot of miles. Yeah, great bike for you to buy if you check off all those boxes. Fat Bob is an awesome bike for you to get. The lean angle is going to be better than some of the floorboard Softails like your Slim or your Heritage. And this bike is, you're going to be able to put it through the turns, a little bit more aggressive lean angle. So if you're someone that's coming off of a sport bike that likes to, put a knee down, well, you're not going to be putting any knees down on this bike, but you get the idea. If you like to get into turns aggressively, Fat Bob's a great bike, good option for you. And the Softail chassis as a whole is really just a good Swiss Army knife or do-all bike. You're not too small where, out on the freeway, you're going to suck. The Sportsters, for any duration, long time out on the highway laying down mileage, the Sportsters are just not good for a couple reasons. The fuel capacity is usually no good, and you've only got a 5-speed transmission in those bikes, and I just feel like unless you have a 1200, they kind of feel a little bit underpowered. The 883 definitely feels underpowered out on the highway, especially if you're trying to keep up with guys on Softails or on touring bikes especially. Now the touring bikes are a completely opposite side of the spectrum, where they're a little bit heavier, a little bit bulkier, more storage, more weight. You have the fairings on there, the radios and everything. So if you're someone that really likes to rip through the canyons or ride more aggressively and likes a more nimble bike, then this bike is also going to be good for you as well. down, a touring bike wouldn't be a great bike for you. Whereas a touring bike is more like if you're going to be laying down long mileage, going state to state, or overnighters, need the storage, or you're going to ride like 2-up, that's when the touring bike is really going to shine. So if you're someone that maybe you ride a passenger occasionally, a passenger is not going to be real comfortable on this bike, you can get a backrest, which increases passenger comfort by about 1,000%. Highly recommend if you're going to ride with a passenger with any kind of frequency, definitely get the passenger backrest. If you're going to lay down some mileage, be on the bike for more than an hour at a time, I'd also recommend getting a different seat for this bike. Your girlfriend will probably leave you if you don't, and your wife, if you buy the bike at all, will probably divorce you just because you bought a Harley-Davidson in general. So at that point, it's not really an issue. Braking on this thing is very easy, one finger activation all day long. Maybe if you're going into an urgent stop, maybe use 2 fingers, but the brakes definitely can stop even a lot more weight than this bike has. The gauge is cool because it's kind of a performance focused gauge where you have the big tach for your RPM, and then you have a digital speedometer down there below. You can also cycle that digital display to give you things like what gear you're in, and RPM, and your fuel remainder, and the mileage you have left free running of gas, and things like that. So the display is really cool with kind of a focus of racy performance orientation. We've customized a couple of these bikes with like these like little windshields to give it kind of that little fairing club style look, and they came out pretty cool. I'll put a link to those videos in the upper right hand corner for you guys to check out. I'd like to issue a challenge right now, guys. I have one survey actually first before I get to the challenge. The survey is, what bike do you like better? Do you like the Fat Bob better, or do you like the Lowrider S better, or do you like the FXDR better? So if you were given your choice any one of these bikes for free, which bike of these 3 would you take for free? I'm going to put a survey in the upper right hand corner. And now here's my challenge, guys. If you have a Fat Bob, I want to see your guys' pictures of going to the grocery store and getting the hoarder items on your Fat Bob. So we're talking toilet paper, we're talking hand sanitizer, we're talking hair clippers, we're talking honey roasted meats, we're talking, what is that, honey roasted spiral hams that are like being bought out and hoarded right now. Send me those pictures on Instagram in the DMs, and I want to feature your picture on my Instagram stories of you going to the store COVID style and picking out those hoarder items on your Fat Bobs. I want to see toilet paper on your foot pegs. I want to see honey spiral frickin' hams on in your backpack or something like that. Show me, get those hoarder items and get them on your Fat Bob. I want to see it. I want to put it on my stories. As always, if you have any questions, guys, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I try to get back to everybody with a legitimate question. And if you're looking for a Harley-Davidson in Southern California, hit us up. Been in business for over 60 years. We have a family atmosphere here. Never any dealer fees, no added dealer markup, no BS shell games, back and forth, smoke and mirrors crap. Just straight business here. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.